Okay, now I'm going to talk about the discrimination policy. Now, what is discrimination policy in racism? It means that any rule, practice, or law that treat people unfairly by their race and by their ethnicity. That's what y'all need to know. Now, the first point I want to talk about is I want to more focus on school and in the prison. In the school, school rules like zero policy and more that focuses on the security has increased the rate of suspension for students, especially for black students. I'm going to call the black student B word, B student. B student tends to experience harsher disciplinary measures at higher rates than their peers in public school in the United States. This is from Ballot Brief 2022. B students are 4 times more likely to experience suspension than their peers. This is from Ballot Brief as well. I got this from his website. Now, the other point I want to talk about is which student is affected most by school discipline. Well, there are 3 categories, which is BIPOC student, which is black, indigenous, and people of color, student with disability, and student from low income background. Study also have shown that black student, this student doesn't misbehave more than white student, but they still get more suspension and more harsh suspension than white student. Now, black students face the highest rate of disciplinary action in both public and private schools. This practice can have a long-term negative effect on student academic and their life outcome. Now,
so this one record?
Oh, yes, we record in front of you. Now, this is more of the example. B students were 4 times more likely to receive out of school suspension than white students. They are 3 times more likely than Latin students to be suspended. B students were over 2 times more likely to be sent to the principal office rather than their peers. Now, if you look into what behavior that they do, white students are often suspended for clear action like smoking or skipping classes. Meanwhile, B students are more likely to be suspended for subjective reasons like disrespect and fighting. This suggests that racial bias may influence how rules are enforced. Now, if we look into the other aspect, we look into the justice policy. The three key causes of racial inequality from within the criminal legal system. First, laws and policy that appear race neutral have disparate impact. The criminal justice system is expensive and doesn't have enough resources, and racial bias influence criminal legal practitioners' use of discretion. The first point that I'm going to discuss is law and policy that appear race neutral. Now, what does this mean? This means that there are laws and policies that people think that is equal to all races, but in fact it is not. The first thing I want to talk about, extreme centers for violent crimes and reliance on criminal history as a basis for determining prison centers are drivers of racial disparities in imprisonment. For example, in the 1986, the U.S. Congress passed or made the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. This policy, how does this do is that for every 5 gram of crack cocaine, you need to spend at least a minimum of 5 years in federal prison. Meanwhile, if you have 500 grams of powder cocaine, you also need to have 5 years in federal prison. It's like the ratio is not completed, and because of this policy disproportionately affects black Americans who were more likely to be convicted for crack offense, while white Americans were more often charged with powder cocaine offense. Although available evidence indicate there are more white cocaine offenders than black, data from the United States Sentencing Commission revealed that in the 2000s, over 84% of federal crack defendants were African American, a proportion that did not vary significantly throughout the 1990s. Now, the second point I want to talk about is the criminal justice system is expensive and doesn't have enough resources, which make things harder for people with low income, especially people of color. Now, what does this mean is that when they are put to prison, then when they are put in prison, they need to wait until their trial, or they need to pay to get out of trial. This is what they call a cash bail. Now, people with low income, especially colored people, doesn't have that kind of money. So what they do is that people in jail who have drug or alcohol problem often don't get help they need, which make it harder for them to live a normal life after they are released. A study shows that B defendants were subject to significantly higher bail requests compared with white defendants. This is from Connican and his peers in 2023. It indicates that compared with whites, the bail requests for black defendants were approximately 3% higher than others, with no statistically evidence. The last point that I want to talk about is racial bias influence criminal legal practitioners' use of discretion. What this means is that racial bias may have affected people who are working in the criminal justice system on how they choose. So what it says is that people of color are more likely to be targeted or treated unfairly by the law enforcement. They often face more traffic stops, search of food, and arrests for drug compared to others. We can see it a lot in movies where the police stop the B people at the roadside because they suspect him. Are you stealing this car? Like that. This is due to bias in how the police interact with these communities. B and Latino people are often treated more severely by the legal system, including prosecutioners. The same bias can affect juries, correctional officers, and parole boards. Now, for example, there is a case, a recent court ruling in North Carolina where racial bias was found to have influenced jury selection and the imposition of the death penalty in the 2009 trial of black defendant EHSAN. Superior Court Judge Whaley Sermon Jr. identified a glaring pattern in racial bias in capital cases in Johnson County, where black defendants were sentenced to death by 100% chance. That means they don't have the chance to defend themselves. They already death sentenced. Meanwhile, white defendants receive a sentence only 45% of the time. Dickett's death sentence will commute to life without parole in 2024. But the ruling could aid other death row inmates with similar biases in their case. The North Carolina Department of Justice intends to appeal the ruling. So, that's it from me. Any question, Ahmad? Oh, later. That's all from me. I'll pass it to my friend Ari.